This is the Criterion Creeps podcast, and tonight we're talking about An Angel at My Table, directed by Jane Campion from 1990. And we're joined by first listener of the podcast,
long time,
second
Yeah,
time,
you really
long
fumbled
time, multi-time,
Second time guest, first time friend.
first time friend,
Because he was
long
the
time
first,
friend.
first friend of the show.
Yeah,
Is what you're trying to say, I believe.
sure. Oliver Granger.
Yeah.
what's up?
Yeah, he's here. An authentic New Zealander
Yeah.
on the only movie worthy from New Zealand of being in the Criterion Collection. Holy shit.
It's our only movie. It's the only movie we made.
Yeah, with your own
The only one.
sweat, piss, and shit slapped
Yeah.
together.
Do you think Taiki Waititi or Bad Taste from Peter Jackson are going to make it in the Criterion one day?
Nope.
They haven't gone to Netflix first. You have to go Netflix, then Criterion.
Work backwards.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I just want to say to all you YouTube listeners, it's like when you say, you don't understand 1950s New Zealand, I don't even understand it either. But I'm a New Zealander, so fuck you.
You're as close as it gets. I guarantee all those people commenting aren't from New Zealand. They're probably from like Delaware. They're like, you don't understand the context of New Zealand in 1990. And it's like, well, we got one.
Yeah,
got one.
I mean, sure, he's a
got
cis white male, but hey, he's from that place. So
Most of them are in New Zealand though, so it's accurate.
Mm-hmm.
Based on the autobiographical work of New Zealand writer Janet Frame, this production depicts the author at various stages of her life. Afflicted with mental and emotional issues, Frame grows in an impoverished family and experiences numerous tragedies while still in her youth, including the deaths of two of her siblings. Portrayed as an adult by Carrie Fox, Frame finds acclaim for her writing while still in a mental institution, and her success helps her move on with her life. So, this is a movie that it sounds like a lot of other movie titles. I gotta say that this
Does it?
the title typifies, like, for, I don't know, North American audiences, the exact type of movie you would see in the foreign film section. It's just this nondescript title. You look at it and go, oh, look at this cover. What country is that from? Is it got subtitles? That's
Hopefully.
Yeah, fuck.
So
It did.
it's an option when you're watching it on the Criterion channel. So yeah, this is a movie that I was not familiar with. I know the director's name, though I don't think I'd seen anything by her ever. I've never seen. I've never seen The Piano.
I've seen most of her films.
Oh, really? Damn!
I've seen the posters for them.
I didn't realize we had the real expert here.
I watched the 3-minute supplement of her talking about her life, and it showed clips from most of these movies. So
Okay.
I feel like that's almost the same thing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
I imagine that Oliver, they teach the works of Jane Campion in schools, correct?
No, it's all Peter Jackson,
Yeah, the Hobbit
Fair.
King.
King himself.
You know.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, this movie had only really been on my radar this whole time, is because this was the first movie I think that way back early in the days when we made the offer on Patreon for people to come onto the show. Oliver's like, yeah, I mean, this is the only one I would do probably, and that's going to be like 4 years from now. Thinking
And you're never gonna fucking get
that
there.
podcast isn't going to last that long. And now he's been on twice.
Hey, time makes fools of us all, right?
That's right. And who the biggest fools but the ones doing this goddamn podcast?
Well, and Oliver Granger, because as I mentioned earlier, he's been here this whole time, so he's as much to blame for this as we are. If we didn't get that email from you, like on our 6th or 7th episode or something, maybe we would have given up long ago. So it's your fault, is what I'm saying.
I regret it all, man. Don't you worry.
So do we.
So anyway, An Angel at My Table. Have you seen this before, Oliver?
Yeah, I have seen it before. I've been in the same room as Jane Campion once.
Wow.
Did you get her?
Go. Oh, I got her. Actually, before this podcast, you know how all New Zealand is a tiny little butt-fuck country and we all know each other?
Mm.
So I actually reached out to Jane Campion to do a little introduction for this episode. And she said, all right, well, crikey, I'm Jane fucking Campion.
That's that was an audio clip we inserted into here. That was an actual thing.
No, actually, I literally did. I gave Auntie Jane a call, and she said, crikey, I'm fucking making a movie here. And actually, I don't know if I'd read it the other day. I saw one of the screenshots from it was trending with Benedict Cumberbatch. So she was right. She was actually too busy to write a movie, but she did send me the introduction to the book,
nice,
which she wrote in. But I think I'll bring that up a little bit later.
Nice.
That's
so you're doing a lot more work than we ever have.
Yeah. When I first emailed her, she's like, "What?" I mean, I keep saying her, but it went through an agent first. She's like, "All right, when do you want to talk to Jane?" And I was like, "I don't want to talk to her, man. I just wanted to say something funny." But she was,
we just wanted her to come on and say butts and dumps for about half a minute. We
so
didn't want anything more.
What would you say to a notorious woman hater before going into this movie?
You're talking about her, right?
Yeah, she hates women.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
self-hating.
This movie, who's to say?
But yeah, I'd seen this movie before. So the big history of Jane Campion and the surprise of the Criterion Collection is that Piano wasn't the first movie on there, but I assume that was the case. I don't know if it was Miramax or whoever's got it, but I assumed it was so widely circulated that it didn't need to be in the Criterion Collection, you know what I mean? This is literally the worst first view of New Zealand cinema in the collection. It's the only one. It's ridiculous. I don't really... I'm younger than, I was born after this movie was made, but Janet Frame, the author herself, probably not that well known here anymore. Like, and I'm talking mainstream circles. Mm-hmm. But Jane Campion was known because when the Piano came out, I actually have no idea when it came out. Was it late 90s, early 2000s? I don't know. I think it's late 90s.
93, I think.
So quite early. So this was, I know Angel of a I think it was her second movie. But so when this came out, this was, when Piano came out, it was given to New Zealand audiences like, this is, New Zealand's finest film.
Yep.
It's incredible and stuff. And actually, what I've talked to the older generation of Kiwis is when it came out, most of them fucking hated the Piano because it was so art house for us at the time. We had no sort of entry into art house cinema. So you had two crowds. The mainstream New Zealanders was like, oh, this is crap. And the other Adi Fadi was like, oh, it's the most incredible thing I've ever seen. So, yeah, this Angel at My Table probably has no cultural relevance in New Zealand anymore, I would say. Jane Campion is herself be well known for the Piano, and then more recently that Top of the Lake TV show.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so that's when I was in the same room.
Forgot about the Top of the Lake thing.
Yeah, that show's actually quite decent.
Yeah.
And so when I was in the same room as her, that was for the second season. I watched it, did a Criterion Group special and sat there and we watched the whole season in one sitting at the cinema. And she came and introduced it.
So did you actually talk to her?
No.
No. What would you have said, though?
Crikey!
Say, where's your meat pie? That's a thing that is also relevant for
I would have said,
people.
What's your favorite sandwich?
What's your favorite sandwich? Is it Marmite? Is it? And if she gave you the wrong answer, what would you have done?
You know what I've done? Yeah. I've given the RJ special.
A smile and a see you later with one of these.
Whoa.
People listening don't know what motion I made. So
this is getting weird.
It was a wave.
RJ, it's like when did your relationship with the works of Janet Frame begin?
When I was a child, I think I really connected with the deep roots and the wholesomeness of the New Zealand people, mostly the working class. I first heard of this person a week ago, and well, I mean, other than I remember Oliver did say, years ago. I'll come on when that New Zealand movie is on, and like everyone else, I thought I'd be dead by here. So, no, I knew nothing of this lady, so this is jumping in fresh as usual, I guess.
I'd like to state one correction. There is actually one other New Zealand movie in the collection, but it's in the Laserdisc episodes. But it's so far down.
It doesn't
count.
count.
So I'm not sure. I doubt you'll ever get to it. But if you do, it is such a challenging movie. I'll come on for it, but it's very racially challenging. So that would be not an enjoyable episode.
Was it We Were Warriors?
Once
We're Warriors. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are any of them enjoyable episodes?
I quite like your double features of Sejun Suzuki.
Oh yeah, we like those too. Those are some of our favorites.
Some of my favorites. Okay, so Angel at My Table. This movie is broken into 3 parts. Part 1 is the coming of age, young adventures of poor people in rural New Zealand, which is amazingly enough, rural life seems pretty consistent all across all walks of existence. A lot of people hanging out in bathtubs, barefoot, old wood shacks, but everyone's just in whimsy. They parade and dance through the woods. There's always a specter of an abusive father hanging over the proceedings. Dead children, multiple dead, dying people. There's so we get introduced, and this is some real Terrence Malick kind of opening shots of young baby Janet with her mother and her running across some grass, and it's very idyllic. And then it sets up this idyllic kind of editing that the rest of the movie has, and it's just you get snapshots of her growing up. She's walking down the street, and she's this chubby little red-haired girl with this big puff of red curly hair, and I'm kind of surprised and glad that it didn't go down this route of everyone just calling her fat or bullying that you would probably see it a lot of the times. It's kind of oh yeah, no, it's fine, it's cool, and that's actually really appreciated, unless I blinked and missed some. But yeah, it was one of those things where yeah, that seems like would be an easy thing to do. But maybe it was a very conscious effort by Jane Campion to be no, we're not fucking doing that.
Yeah, there was no extreme scenes of in some similar movies of intense chronic bullying. We're gonna do something absolutely disturbing to her when she's a child.
Yeah, because you get the closest thing to it would be sort of when she takes money from the purse to buy everybody in her class gum, candy stuff, and her teacher makes her stare at the chalkboard to break her will, which is some classic authoritarianism in the schoolhouse, until she has to out herself as being a thief, and then all the kids go, "She's a thief," which is oh, that's good. That'll be something that everyone calls you forever. But they don't. They kind of drop that. It's just kind of one of those incidents from, I'm assuming, from the books that I have not read. You get these weird little scenes that I also appreciate, and kind of falls it under that elliptical independent filmmaking style, where you have this man who's having maybe a seizure on the train deck, or he's epileptic, and he's just there, and it's just she just lingers on this, and it's kind of oh, but I guess it kind of puts into, it's kind of not foreshadowing, but
that was chronic foreshadowing, because I was aware of the names of the places where that was literally at the hospital which she ended up in.
Okay. There we go. Because I did they have this scene, you're how does this play into anything else? It just seems like a moment, but it does lead into it in a way that it's indirect. It's really well done.
Another scene that reminds me of what you're talking about is another one that had no relevance to the story, is when that girl was singing and they were she's leaving school, her dad died or something, or mum died. And it was sort of this, that was a very independent random scene of just this girl singing, "Oh, it's so sad her mum died." And that was it, with you never see her again.
Yeah, my creeps note here is problematic child, one-sided cowboy and Indians. As we have this young boy just going around doing the running around the yard, and you're yes, because was this 1924 that we were opening up in?
Did you have a problem with that going in, where you had like, including Rupert's email at the start. Do you no fucking idea when the movie was set when you were watching it? Until the Hitler on the news came in.
Well,
Yeah.
no, I mean, I know they definitely say that it's like,
when
like
she
I was
was
born
born,
in
I
1920.
think.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's like, so you're okay. And then like the next time it comes up, it's like we won the war. Like they just bombed Japan. The war is over, and it's like, oh, like, because so obviously that is just like a backdrop. It's just kind of happening in the background. It's not like a major point, which makes sense when you're a kid. Like it would seem like a very distant thing, especially if like there's nothing going on in the part of the world that you're existing in. It would just be like, oh, it's an afterthought. It's just like on the cusp, unless it's especially not what your movie's about. And you're like, oh, hey, we're going to do some scenes of soldiers. It's like, well, that's going to cost you like $250,000 to do this, adjusted for inflation, of course. But so yeah, like pretty well, like this is just kind of these like episodic moments of Janet Frame's life growing up. There's no real rhyme or reason, I felt, to a lot of it. It's just kind of, I don't know, kind of poetic. It's like the suggestions of like,
what was that word, Jared?
poetic kind of. That's what
wow.
that's what I felt like. The first kind of hour segments where like it felt kind of a little listless, a little directionless, but I mean engaging enough in this way. But this was also made for television originally. I'm assuming it would have been broadcast in 3 parts, and then because it was successful enough, they're like, hey, let's put it together as a movie and shop it around to these film festivals. Let's put New Zealand on the map. And that's
I'm not actually 100% sure that it was ever actually screened on television. I think obviously
it just made the leap.
The initial idea was, and they filmed it actually in 16 mil, and then maybe the finished product, then they turned to a movie. I'll have to double check that, but I'm not sure. One thing I did want to mention when you said the scenes of pointlessness, and I made the same mistake I did with Jamaica Inn, as I read the books that this was based on. And so each scene, apart from for the one I mentioned before, the girl singing, I don't remember, but each scene, like the candy and other scenes, were of extreme importance in the book. So it was something that she lingered on for the rest of her lives as life-defining moments. So even though in the previous one I said about Jamaica and saying don't read the book because it will spoil the movie, there'll be a lot of times I think I'll be bringing up the book.
Well, it's good that you've actually read it though, because that is, I think, important. So like, you'd seen the movie before. Had you read the book
before
prior?
I read the book? So I saw the movie. So spoiler, I saw the movie. I don't know, when I saw it a couple of years ago, before I read the books, probably before I was aware of the Criterion. Actually, it would have been, because if it was a Criterion, I wouldn't have watched it after you guys came along. So, because I was like, there's no fucking, if it's a Criterion, no matter how far along it is, I'm not fucking watching it. Sorry, Roma. Sorry.
Good on you. Irishman.
So, and the movie, when I first watched it, had little consequence to me. It didn't actually leave me with any impact whatsoever. So I read the book, I think, earlier in the year in preparation for this episode, which definitely affected my viewing this time.
Okay. So do you, I guess with that in mind, does my read of it is feeling kind of listless seem right, though, in the terms of a person who hasn't read the book, where it's just kind of like, what is this in aid of? Like, other than it's like, oh, it's just telling a story, but it's not like, there's no like aha, like psychological reading. It seems like this is like a far more impressionistic, like kind of execution, because the person's read the book and it's like, well, I'm going to make a thing about these are the things that jumped out at me, and here's a series of scenes that are like important, but like not necessarily like the it lacks that narrative guide of like why that's important, because there's no like there's no heavy-handed voiceover narration, like of like, this is what happened to me, and this was very important because of that. And I think because that's removed, which is not a bad thing, it does kind of feel like, oh, these are just scenes kind of like shuffled together. And then you get things again like the foreshadowing of like, oh, my sister's like image didn't appear properly in the photograph. What's going to happen to her? And you're like, oh, and it's startling still. When Myrtle,
Yeah.
dies, and it's just like, because that's exactly what happened. There's this man barges in, because it's like, I'm a doctor, and it's like,
Your daughter's dead.
She's dead.
Crikey. That reminds me. Have you guys seen Oliver? I know Jared hasn't. Have you seen the new Halloween movie?
No.
The David Gordon
podcast
Green one.
Yeah, I have.
There's a scene in that movie that is just like, it's still to this day I think about it. Whenever like there's a big accident and people are coming out, and the guy looks and he goes, "Get inside. I'm a doctor." And then people just go inside, and then and that's it. And
You've
weird.
actually touched on an essential theme of the book there, which is people, which is what I think actually is spoil. I didn't want to talk about too much till later, but is what I thought how the movie failed. And an essential theme of the book, at least, was people telling Janet Frame what to do. And so the same with the doctor. I'm a doctor. This is what you got to do. So I think what worked in the movie, which sounds like some stuff you resonated in, just sort of beautiful poetic scenes, which maybe fits more into Janet's writing, which actually I've read a biography. I haven't read her other books. Poetic lists of scenes flying together, which it works for the movie, but actually, as far as I'm concerned with the book, failed the central themes of the book, which I'll talk about later.
That's interesting. And doctors.
Yeah, it's just
lobotomizing
power
everyone.
telling men of power telling you're going to go doctor, you're going to get a lobotomy. I'm a doctor, this is what you got to do. I'm a teacher, you've got to go to hospital, that kind of stuff.
I've been there.
So I guess, like, to summarize part one for myself, I kind of like view this like at times as like poverty porn, where it's just like, it's like this weird, like almost sentimentality that a lot of 90s filmmakers like Harmony Korine comes to mind. I'm just kind of like, oh, look at the way life was, but I'm going to present it really stripped down. Like Lynn Ramsey with Ratcatcher, which is a little, like, what was it, 2000? Very similar. Like there's like very strong vibes between like Lynn Ramsey and Jane Campion. And also, I'm like, oh, they're also both like women directors, and they're kind of like, their subject matter is just beelined onto the stories here of like just people, but whether they live in like row houses or they're living, in not projects, but the council housing. Yeah. And or here it's just like, well, these are just like people like living out on the farm, like, and they're like, but it's like, what does the dad do for a living? And fuck, like when he first showed up, I was kind of like, who is this, like the janitor at the school? I missed something. I was like, whoa, are they like, is this getting into bad man vibes? But then I was like, oh, okay, that's her dad. I see. And then of course it's like, he seems like a decent guy until they start talking about fucking. You have some adolescent fucking in the woods, which of course that's what you do in indie-rific movies.
Who does that?
Adolescents, like
okay,
from like a Larry Clark movie. So there's boning,
sure,
because that's contrary to the idea that children don't do that. 12-year-olds don't have sex with 12-year-olds or whatever.
I mean, most I know don't, but
right. So, but it doesn't happen. But then to be like, but it does happen. I'm going to show it as a movie. I can do that as a female director. I'm bold enough to get away with this because I'm not going to be a man going about showing this, which could get real creepy
through the male gaze,
as they say.
It's interesting though with that sex scene. If you're talking about female directors, it was all behind the tree. You saw some legs, some noises, and it was mostly Janet's. If a man directed that, it'd probably be a completely different and
really in your face.
And sort of like, let's sexualize the scene, which wasn't the point.
But or you get fat girl, and you get that handling, right? Yeah.
Sure.
So anyway, so that's kind of like my notes on part one, To the Island, as it's called.
Right. Yeah.
Where was I going to go? You bring it in, Jared. Well, sorry, RJ. While I'm thinking,
I'm the wrong guy to ask. I never have anything to say.
He wants other people to talk.
Usually, She's a little kid, and she stole some money. She bought some gum. And I'm just interested. In New Zealand, can you just buy satchels of gum where it's just like hundreds of pieces of gum?
In 1932, 100%. That's all all candy
it's
was.
It's still now where you guys buy your milks in a sack. We buy our gum in a sack. So
allegedly. So that was what I thought, though.
One thing I was conscious of in this movie, and then learning it was a TV show first, there's almost no establishing shots. There's the one of her walking down the road at the start.
Yep.
But presumably because it was TV and budget reasons as well, it's basically pretty close up from then on. So, I mean, I assume you guys have no idea where in the country the movie was set.
It's like near the beach.
Yeah, it's in New Zealand. New Zealand. Yeah.
So that was it's in the South Island, which is the shit island.
What's the good island?
The North Island where I'm at. So North Island's where it's all at. South Island, shithole. Nah, there's the beautiful mountains. Probably I've never been there. Once or twice maybe. So there's no establishing shot. So I guess that was a part of the theme. And like I said, you no idea where the dad was. In the book, it was very clear he worked on the railroads, which is why maybe some of those scenes of the trains were quite. There was an establishing shot of the trains going across, and where they were living was apparently not council flats, but properties maintained by the railroad company, but in complete poverty. It wasn't until you mentioned before where I actually started thinking of movies like Gummo and stuff, like the bathtubs and that Gummo's the pool.
Well, I think of George Washington. I just thought of too.
That's another one. Yeah.
Oh no, it's it's so funny because there'll be people who be like, no, these are real movies. They have a real point of view, and sometimes I'm like, or it's an aesthetic that you just like. I mean, these are when I think of again, I use the term indie-rific because I mean these things there was some other movie before as you were talking. I was like, oh yeah, and then George Washington, and then you went right to this vibe of these movies.
So most these poor people, they're going to have a bathtub in their backyard, 100%, but they're not going to have 5 set up next to each other, beautifully on their backyard. I thought one thing in the first part, I think it captured New Zealand's way of talking really well, and actually stuff that carried on in Taika Waititi's films. It was sort of someone said they did a class at school called commercial. She's like, "Did you know I do commercial at school?" She's like, "Oh yeah," and sort of that was the conversation, the awkwardness of, "Oh yeah, okay."
Oh yeah.
Okay, bye. Or I can do Spanish dancing. Oh, show us. Oh, nice. That's how New Zealanders talk to each other.
Clearly. Have you ever done any Spanish dancing?
No. Have you?
I'm doing it right now, which is most people can't see.
So, yeah, in the book, most of the scenes chosen were, stuff that affected her really badly. And as I mentioned before, maybe in the movie it just comes off as, these are little aspects of her life that change her. For example, another one was when she was writing her poem, and her sister told her to change a word in the poem, and then she rubbed it. She's like, rub it out and write another word, about the moon. And she actually ends up reading the poem out loud, and in the end she didn't change the word. That was like a extreme act of defiance for her, not following what her sister said.
I know exactly what you mean. I like that scene. I thought it was nice because when she was changing it, I was like, I think what she wrote was better.
Yeah, it was better.
Stick with that, girl. And then I was happy to see when they were reading it with the teacher, who I gotta admit,
gave her a big huggy. Gave her a big.
1930s or not, maybe don't have the kids sit on your lap
and give them a big hug.
Teaching. I feel like that could be a problem. But I like that scene too. Right, Jer?
Absolutely. Don't have kids on your laps that aren't yours.
No, maybe don't do that.
Don't.
Just don't.
Yeah.
I was gonna say I quite liked other scenes of where the kids would see the Spanish dancing or other things, and then spend the rest of the day replicating that at home. I thought that was quite natural, where kids would pick up one thing of their day, and then that's them for the week. They'll be doing Spanish dancing around the house.
I agree. I like that too, where it is like, kids see one thing, and then it's just like, this is what I am now, and you go, okay. Yeah, that's weird, but all right. That's what kids do. So it makes sense. Right, Jared?
Absolutely. Spanish dancing.
You're a big Spanish dancing boy.
Oh,
I've seen it.
Man, you've seen it.
I've seen it. You weren't there, but I saw it.
Then we get we have Alexia Koog, the as child Janet. We have adolescent Janet, played by Karen Ferguson, and from my understanding, and hopefully this isn't a Louis Benoit situation, she kind of vanishes. Those two are like you never see them again, and then it's Carrie Fox for like the
rest of the movie, right?
for like pretty well like the very end of part one and all the way through the rest, and it's just Carrie Fox. Yeah,
and I thought they probably should have maybe done a third one if they were like keen on changing actresses, because I think that the change of time, especially when she was in the mental hospital, 8 years. And then she becomes an adult. It's sort of there's not much change from her as a college student into adulthood. She looks about the same by the end of the movie. A couple more added wrinkles. That's about it.
Yeah, even though it's like 20 or 30 years or something like that.
Yeah,
they rip right through. I mean, that's pretty movie-ish, though. I can imagine old fellow New Zealander Russell Crowe blasting through A Beautiful Mind, slap some of that old man makeup on at the end to give your big speech.
I mean, that was part of it, yeah. For sure. Yeah.
So then we get to part two, which is An Angel at My Table. And so, of course, my assumption was, because I didn't really know anything about this movie until I started it, and I saw something about mentioning mental institutions, and I was kind of like, oh, is she going to be talking? Is she going to see angels at the dining table? Is that what's going to lead her to being in the mental hospital? These were things I just like thought of as I was like, okay, what can I expect from this as it goes on? But it's nothing of the sort. She goes to like a real school now, and she's moving on up. She takes that train, RJ. Remember, we can book in things with trains, because the train the house in which you live is near the trains, and then you take the train, and that's your path out of that life. Onward.
What else does it symbolize?
Transition, movement.
What else are metaphors for trains?
Trains going into tunnels.
Tell me more about trains.
Well, I'm done with trains.
Okay.
Put that behind us. Okay.
Sure.
So, the next sequence is kind of about a woman struggling with society, regular life, even though it's so strange. Like, I watched this, and this movie was made in 1990. Barton Fink is a movie that's like coming out. This is that time frame. That's not that long ago, but I watched this and I wonder, I'm like, like nothing she's doing seems that terribly unusual in regards to like having lived a life and just seeing people like do all sorts of things. And you're kind of, oh yeah. I mean, she's quirky, but she like goes to the graveyard and squirrels things away and eats there and hangs out and does what have you.
That won't bring your sister back. Yeah, I know that, bitch.
I know. Yeah.
But of course, this is a woman that's running afoul of society, and what decent society needs to do is help her. They need to help her find a path forward, because they're like, well, she's capable of having a family and kids, and in the state that she's in, well, she's never going to meet a man. She's certainly not going to be able to like get it together and be sensible. So we're going to have to help her. That's sort of like the walls closing in on, and I think that would be kind of this is like in some ways like the dramatic impetus for the movie, and it's kind of weird that it happens structurally right in the middle, because when you get to part 3, there's not a lot of drama left. Like, cause it's like, cause you can't beat medical horror for me. Like when you start realizing the gravity of the situation, and your ability to make choices for yourself, your mom is signing off on like the medical establishment to do whatever they want to you, and they just keep telling you, oh hey, we have this new technology, it's called electroshock therapy, it's the only way to help with your schizophrenia, because you definitely have that, and we're going to stick to it even if like it doesn't seem right. We're going to do it. because we want to make you better. You'll fit right in. And, hundreds of times later, I can't remember what the time frame is. Is it 200 doses of electroshock therapy?
200, yeah.
In 8 years? I don't know.
Is that like
Yeah.
Well, so like that one too, like I actually
a fortnight?
like schizophrenia is really weird, right? And
Yeah.
electric shock in general too, because I've seen a ton of those old like psych videos about these things and like the practices that they used to do. And electric shock and lobotomies, they would just do fucking whenever they felt like. And that was the issue, where it was like what you said, Jared, was like, do you have schizophrenia? We don't know. I just kind of put a stick in there and twist it around a little bit. But one thing that's like kind of weird is electric shocks actually like can be really beneficial for people, especially people with depression, which is the weird one, where it kind of like it creates like a new surge of not just serotonin, but like acetylcholine or something like that. Like it like shoots up that. So people with depression, like some people like routinely get electric shock, but it's like once every couple of months or something like that. But what we have now is a lot better than I think what they had in the 40s, when it was
a
just
car
like
battery attached to.
Yeah.
I literally got my teeth taken out yesterday. Oh, that's gonna hurt.
Yeah. And you go, that's too bad for you. So yeah, it's I think Jared's what you said was right on. It's like medical horror is pretty fucking gnarly. But yeah, it's a weird thing, right? Like,
yeah. I mean, I don't think it's like unique to me, but that is like one of those genres that, I mean, I know, I think it totally is something that like a ton of people are affected by, because often people will say that with The Exorcist, it's not like the possession stuff that like freaked them out. It's the stuff where like it's like the medical stuff with Reagan, as they're trying to figure out what is scientifically wrong with her, and they're putting her through this battery of tests. And that's the stuff that people say, yeah, that's what like really disturbed me, was like just like being brought into a hospital and like having like being hooked up to these machines, because like hospitals are not fun in any way, shape, or form. They suck. They're a necessity, but then there's times where it turns to, what we see here in an Angel at My Table, where it's like, oh hey, yeah, we're going to take you to the right place for you, and there's going to be people, and they'll speak to you in a very calm, comforting way, and explain to you how they know what's best for you. And then suddenly you're in this blue tinted room with like, and just like with people who have like full on like mental disabilities, that you're like, I don't feel like I belong here at all, but who's gonna believe you? It's like the worst case scenario of like, I'm not crazy, and then you find yourself in the loony bin with people that like are, and you're like, what am I going to do about this? That's a terrifying situation. And then the idea that like it's the state or whoever who has to deem you not crazy, it's terrifying stuff. Nobody wants it to happen to them. The idea of that happening, not fun.
Let's talk about, I just want to talk about the ladies for a second as well. Statistically still happening, which is a fear of this movie and what you're talking about. They come out all the time and saying women are more likely to undergo procedures they have not agreed with or consented with to this day.
Well, there's those.
Men. So, especially after birth, stuff like after birth. Oh, we've noticed something wrong while you're in there. You're all out of it, just giving birth. We're just gonna cut. We're just gonna cut out your ovaries or something like that.
Oh, there was that thing. Like, I have no idea the credence of this, but I remember kind of in the lagging days of the Trump presidency, there was like the story of like, oh, these women like coming from Mexico being detained. And like, oh, there's this doctor in Texas who's just giving them hysterectomies. They were going into these like scenarios where they didn't know what was being done to them, and then it's like it's just being done. You're like, oh, what is this? You're fixing them and then releasing them into the population. It's like, what the fuck? And it's like, is this real? Like, do we live in a world where this is just like weird internet hoaxes and like this is too horrifying to like fathom? Or is it completely believable because this is the world we live in? And like, and people will be like, oh yeah, it's like, what can you do? You're like, oh my God. Cause like, that's the thing. It's like people were getting lobotomized, in the last 100 years, like on the regular. And you're like, well, that doesn't make a lot of sense. And then like, there's the images of, the people shambling around, holding their stuffed animals, doing the little lobotomy shuffle. And you're like, oh, Yeah, you get to see that, and you're like, that's going to be you next. Oh no, our treatment will yours will do better, because it's a really good idea to like mess around in there, because we're just practicing. We don't know what's going to happen, but eventually we'll get it right, and we think we're going to get it right with you. But it doesn't matter if you are okay with that or not, because it's what's best.
Yeah. I've often thought the best practice for me is just getting a stick and just kind of going right in here between my eye, just giving it a wiggle. That's all they do, Jarrett.
Isn't that like
it's not that evasive. They just give it a little wiggle right in the front there. Just kind of scramble it up a little bit, and then they pull it back out. No problem.
I think for a really long time as a kid, like lobotomies were kind of this like joke in cartoons, like Homer Simpson getting a lobotomy. Yeah. And you're just like, what's that? Oh, they take a little piece of your brain, and like in your mind, you're just like, they take out like a whole like lump, like a huge handful. But in I think it wasn't until I read From Hell, where they actually like they go like
describe the process.
They describe how the lobotomy goes about, and you're just like, oh, it's just a little bit. It's just a little nubbin that they take, and that's all it takes. A little flick of the switch, and then suddenly you're like, done. You're not a problem anymore.
Did you notice in the movie they called it something different?
They call it a leucotomy.
Yeah.
Is there a difference?
It depends. Like, so there are a couple different lobotomies, like the ones like Jarrett mentioned. There's some where they would actually like crack open and remove. There were like ones where they'd either go in through the eye or nose with the stick, and they just kind of like whip around. And then there were some where they'd go in and they would cut like some of the tissue between your brain parts. It's I think that's the one it is, where they're cutting the fibers in between, which is like that's actually probably the best one you could get, because like
good, it's the good kind.
Yeah, well actually, so like there's people with like chronic epilepsy, there's this little piece that connects your two hemispheres, the corpus callosum, and like people with seizures, what happens is both sides like go at the same time. So what happens really commonly is they cut that, and then the two hemispheres aren't connected anymore, and then you can still kind of function. I bet that's what they gave her, because afterwards she can still function pretty normally. So I bet they gave her one of the good ones, where they're
they wanted to give her.
Yeah, where it's like they're making it where it's like certain areas aren't connected together, so they can still kind of function independently, but not as well. Is my guess. But yeah, it was a leucotomy, which I was like, oh yeah, I think I know that. I think that's where they sever stuff, but I could be a little bit off. I don't quite know.
There we go. Leuco.
Yeah, leucotomy. I'm pretty sure that's what it is.
Oh, it's like cutting of white nerve fibers within the brain, especially prefrontal. And
because like leukocytes are just like white cells, right? So it's
awesome. So anyway, the one of the dangers, I guess, of like propagating the fear of like medical horror is that it instills this distrust and fear in medical professions, which has consequences sometimes when you're trying to get people vaccinated and then they're like, but I don't want to get the microbes and the nanites in me, otherwise they'll control myself. And because like they're just like going off of whatever they want to hear, despite the fact that it's like, no, I think we got a pretty good handle on vaccinations, but we don't know anything about brains. Brains are kind of a big question mark when it goes to messing around in there. So I don't know, but some people would just like say, well, see, big pharma.
You gotta watch out for big pharma. Yeah, it can get misconstrued.
Double-edged sword.
Yeah. Unfortunately,
you have a little bit of caution, but then there's other things that leads to like people destroying 5G towers.
Yeah, because it's all connected, right?
I watched Angel at my table.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing.
Down to 5G. Ugh. I'm not sure if it was a point to make it about her being as a woman getting the medical thing, but she did, and in the hospital she was in, it seemed mostly women. There was a couple of guys in there during that dance scene. But when Rupert gave birth the second time, and reading these things about women getting given this or not listening to, there was several times where I felt like where Rupert's like, oh, this epidural's not working. And she told it to the nurse, no, it's fine, it's working. And
Mm-hmm.
she turns to me, she's like, I'm in a lot of pain. So I sort of stood by her side. It's like, no, can you check this out? No, she's fine. And then, I felt like I had to step up as a man to say, no, look her. And, oh yeah, sorry, no, you're right. It's slipped out.
Yeah.
Oh, whoops. We were putting this into a tangerine the whole time.
There is something that doesn't get stressed enough to people in general is like having an advocate when you're dealing in the medical world, because there is an arrogance. People are like flawed, well-meaning, but at the same time they also have like who are you to tell me how to do my job? But you're like, no, sometimes like that person might see something that you're not seeing and they're telling you, but they're kind of like, no, let me do this. You're like, no, like they're saying this. And you're like, that's what they all say. You're like, no, listen to what I'm saying. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
But it's what it is. And speaking of like the medical industry and medical practices in regards to women, I think about the movie Haxan from way back when, the documentary. It has that entire segment on it's kind of, it's 1920, so it is like more of the time rather than a 1990 movie talking about like 1924 through like 1960 or whatever. Mm-hmm. We have Haxan. It was like made in that period of time, talking about like, oh, there's these witches, and then like we didn't know what it was, but now we know it's about hysteria, hysterical women, and these are now treatments that we can use to treat women's hysteria, which is again like, oh, it's a snapshot of like 1924 science or medical understandings of mind and body or whatever. But and here we go. This is like kind of more of the checks those boxes, like a Girl Interrupted or a One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, where it's just like a horror show. Or there's like the, what's his name, Frederick Wiseman, the Titicut Follies, which kind of like blew the lid off of like how these like mental institutions were in reality. Just like kind of giant like free for all sites of like who knows what they're doing, but they're got to keep them off the streets, help out the family so they can go get jobs and keep taxes going, and we'll take these people and shuffle them off into the dark shadows and whatever. We're going to try out some stuff. We're going to try out some new medicine that got sent to us. Maybe it'll work. I don't know. I'm going to write a journal though, and it's going to be approved by my peer here, who also will be like, "Hey, do you want to help me write mine and get like some credentials on it?" Fuck yeah, I do. And the circle jerk continues, right, RJ?
I mean, I guess if that's the language you want to use, I would choose some more delicate terms, but that's fine.
Ski poles?
Again,
Dutch rudders?
Not quite.
What? That's
potentially.
That's a very nice data poster, by the way, in the back. It's nice to see it.
Is it coming in clear right now?
Beautiful.
See, it's like I've long said, we just need a Guinan on one side, maybe a Quark.
So one of the things that this is the most interesting part of the three for me. The one thing that this also kind of goes into the territory of that I don't know how I feel about is this idea that like art will save you, which I think, because that's basically what happens. She goes on to become a writer, and there's kind of these little bits and bobs of like her influences. Like she has the teacher in part one that like really had a big influence her on being a storyteller and like writing, and she's like, oh yeah, I really like that, but it's not this like, it doesn't focus in on her being a writer that much. It's kind of like, oh yeah, she writes. There's no like moment of her like sitting around with a cigarette at the typewriter writing, because that's not really how it works. It's not interesting. It's kind of like, oh, she's doing it. But that's the thing, is like the only reason that she doesn't wind up shuffling around with that teddy bear under her arm is because she kept writing, and it got into the right hands, and she winds up getting a publishing deal. Or like her book, or a book of hers is going to get published or printed, and then the doctors go,
wait,
okay, we won't do that. It was scheduled for whatever, a week from now or 2 weeks from now. Who knows, like the license of that, but like
apparently in the movie and in the book it wasn't clear. I think they like to say it came right down to the wire, or the day of she got. But I'm pretty sure, like I tried looking into myself, I'm pretty sure we're talking a week, 2 weeks max. It was scheduled when she got, you got a book published. So it was, I think, in real life, really to the wire. of you're about to get this. Oh, whoops! No, it turns out you're not an idiot.
Can I be honest with you, boys?
Yeah.
I thought she did get the lobotomy and still.
Yeah, you were saying that before. Yeah, no,
yeah. I feel like I was way off for a second.
Yeah, because she got published.
Yeah.
They were like, oh wait, no. They basically after she got published, it was sort of like, let's get you out here within a month. Let's cancel that operation and get you out.
I think I missed that part, and I thought
you thought the whole third part of it, like where everything's like, oh, she's gonna go on a boat ride,
Yeah.
she's gonna travel around and hang out with.
RJ thought this was a pro lobotomy movie.
hanging out with the Bohemians on like this little like island paradise, and everything works out great.
This is what happens when you when you don't give a movie 110.
When seeing the movie and what you mentioned before with art saved you, is that the question as well? Like, do you have to be like something a little bit wrong with you to be a good writer? Are all good writers a
Seems
bit
like it.
fucked up? Because in my opinion, yes. Like even. Like, I just feel like if you haven't had this done to you, or you haven't got a different view on life, you've got really nothing interesting to say.
Which,
Yeah, probably.
right? I mean, but so much of it's relative, right? I mean, and so much of the great social project has been for like, a long time. Let's eliminate differences. Let's teach people the same. Let's like everyone kind of like works on this one curve, and let's teach every single person the exact same way, and it's going to work out one way or another. That's neither here nor there. And if it changes, that'll be the great artist. There'll be a little different. And then of course there's the other side of that where it's like there's the person who's like medicated. And they're like, well, to write, I have to be off my meds.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's like, no, sometimes they're just like, there's nothing that can be done. It's just like, they're going to be rambling, writing people. I'm an artist painter, but like during the day I sling shit at cars from the street. And I don't know there's no right or wrong there. It's just kind of like, yeah, that's something that happens. And it is what it is. There's like no judgment in that beyond the fact that like, oh wow, I mean, that's not the lifestyle for me personally. Maybe I'm just going to be a boring person with like a middle class view of the world of like, well, it'd be nice to be able to write for a living or whatever, but I've got to pay those bills.
Yeah.
I got to cover that mortgage. I'll read other people, and like there's a lot of people who are like, there's a will. There's going to be people that pull it off. There's very boring people who are very successful that write, and it's like, man, this is complete crap, but beloved crap, and there's nothing wrong with them at all. They're just uninteresting, but they just write. But it clicks with enough people, then that's what it is. And then there's really
genre noir. I was just thinking in like in terms of the Criterion collection. If you think of all the good movies we've seen, is there any movie directed by someone that we assume is relatively normal that was anything interesting? Like, I don't know much about genre noir. He looked like a normal dude. His movies fucking suck.
He's a square.
Yeah, Werner Herzog on the other. Yeah. The only other one I could think of was the director, but he was pretty, like, I think he was pretty ahead of his time, like Douglas Sirk. He's a bit of a square, but he was ahead of his time. I think his movies had something to say.
Man, yeah. I mean, it's.
I'm just thinking of people, David Lynch, you know what I mean, or even Alan Moore as a writer.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to be on that next level to be interesting.
Well, I mean, to be like, these are like also the top tier like creators, I guess, like the ones that they're the ones that come to our minds. There's like this like middle of the road, like they're very good, but they might not be like that one that like elevates above and beyond, where they're probably going to remember forever. And those are the ones that are going to be interesting forever and ever. But there's like the people who just like they write, and not just like maybe technical manuals, but they write novels. And there's
Tom Clancy.
Well, yeah, he's
Dan Brown.
They're
Da Vinci Code.
Serviceable.
Dan Brown was certainly something that came to mind. Actually, I had Dan Brown in my head.
Well, it's like, yeah, because like, who knows what actually drove them to become writers? Like, what was their
Yeah.
impetus of like, I really just want to write like stories about being a man and like with my team, my SEALs, and taking down the bad guys, and that's what their office was like. Was that what you got into writing for, or was that just like what you started writing that sold, and then you just kept doing that, and now you're like, now you're on the back of like helicarriers with your aviator sunglasses, arms across your chest, being like, yeah, I don't.
Is he still alive?
Tom Clancy.
Yeah, I think so.
This brings it into the third part of the movie. Not that I want to skip to that just yet, but he
where Janet Frame meets Tom Clancy. No, Tom Clancy is very dead.
But her publisher mentioned the other author. This author sucks, but she writes bestsellers. You know what I mean? Presumably, that author he's talking about was someone of normal mind. And in the movie, when we're watching it, Rupert brought up, like, if she wasn't in this mental institute, would she have been a popular writer, or would she have been a good writer? The answer, I think, is probably not. But would she swap getting out, those 8 years of mental institute for a couple of good books? Probably.
That's kind of like that thing that it was in like shows and they were making fun of it, but it's like people putting out rap albums that are like, hey, but you've never been in prison, so your albums aren't going to be as sellable as someone who has. So it's like you got to go like get caught with a gun, go to prison just for like a week or two, and then we'll release your album and be like, yeah, you from prison, man. And like same kind of idea, right? It's like writer, it's like, oh, you were in like the asylum, you got some serious shit, people are gonna take you for real. Same kind of idea, maybe.
You wonder if back then that in her books was that publicized. I think one of her early books was about her time in the mental institute, so probably in the blurb it said she was in one, so it'd make you more interested to reading it. But I wonder if they used that time when she started writing books. Oh, she was mental for 8 years. Read this book; it's going to be a cracker. I don't know.
So this is like maybe like a telling thing. So if you go to Janet Frame's Wikipedia page, you look at the list of her novels. It looks like she wrote a dozen, not including short stories and children's fiction and poetry and autobiographies. And there's only one that actually has a hyperlink, and that is the Carpathians, which sounds like it's a real nice piece, RJ, of magic realism.
Oh, God.
Oh, is that what that is?
That's what I was saying in the intro. I don't think New Zealanders, and then especially the general population of the world, knows who the fuck Janet Frame is. She's not culturally relevant. But even this movie in general, it's why it's a shame it was in the Criterion collection. Like Jane Campion's not like super relevant to New Zealand filmmaking. I mean, Piano was a huge milestone in films. But as far as people talking about now, and what I actually was trying to reach out to Jane Campion before I started this, I was like, can you give any relevance to the majority of people watching this movie who have, one, no idea what the fuck New Zealand is, two, no idea who Janet Frame is, and three, most likely has no idea who you are. And that's the majority of people, I assume, watching this movie on the Criterion.
Well, I guess because like I was wondering, and like I have no idea how to even draw a parallel of like what would be the equivalent of like Janet Frame in terms of like a Canadian author. Because in my mind, I'm like, who are like really famous like female Canadian authors? Like, well, Margaret Atwood, but like, but she's like, I mean,
next level.
Yeah, like she's like huge, and like like even without like the Handmaid's Tale stuff, like she's like her work kind of is like this sort of like science fiction, but like literature, and like her. So I mean, like she's like mega star, but then like Janet Frame, it's like, oh, she has a movie based on her, and there's a story about her, and then there was like, I'm not even sure is it an author that is like the diving, or the butterfly and the diving bell? Because like the whole thing about him is like it's like an autobiography of a writer who is like becomes like a brain inside of a body, and that's it. And then it's like, well, he goes on to be a writer, and it's like, well, is it like because the writing is actually good, or is it because there's a story attached to it? Like, this is the woman that like was saved by her writing from the mental institute. I don't know. It's unfair to make a judgment on it because I've never read a frame. I've never read a page. I have no idea if it's good. I'm not much of a reader, but I'm a movie watcher. So I don't know. Those are thoughts.
I don't think it came out in the movie very well. Like especially when I first watched it, I thought she was a bit of a dolt, like a bit of a dingbat. But actually, in the book, what she states is is that she was actually, and well, she backs it up with achievements she made at school. She was actually very highly intelligent, and I think because of the New Zealand way of speaking, it's like, oh yeah, I wrote a book. Oh yeah, that's good. Actually, I think in her mind she was on that intelligence level. I think she was incredibly smart.
Well, I 100% believe that, but like, I don't know if it comes through in the film.
It definitely doesn't. She comes off as sort of a simpleton, and there's only select, like, I think we probably needed a scene of just a passage of her book to be like, whoa, you know, or something she wrote about the mental institute or something to be like, wow, she's got something going on there. But then at least we didn't enter this movie being a book adaptation, especially a movie about a writer that we got fucking just endless amounts of what's the word, you know, when they're talking over the movie, you know the word.
What word?
Voiceover.
Voiceover.
Narration?
We didn't get. I'm glad we didn't get endless amounts of narration.
Right.
But we might have needed something just to be like, oh, she actually is at this time producing some pretty incredible, moving stuff.
Yeah, like give us some prose to go off of, or like her insights, like pretty. Yeah. So you're like, oh, this is her internal voice that you, when it's expressed on the page, this is what it is. This is like how she's thinking, and this is how she's interacting in the world. Because
and this is how she's interpreted the situation with the gum. This is how she interpreted it. I mean, I can't believe I'm asking for more narration in the movie, because most likely, most movies I'd say cut the narration.
Right.
Could cut it all.
Yeah. It's very small. Hey, like, is there? I like thinking back.
In the first part,
like
there's almost none.
Scenes?
Yeah, in the first part, there's none, and in the second part, I can't remember. And the third part is a big thing about her being sexless. But
Same.
yeah, there's not much. Being inside.
There's just a couple.
Right.
A couple.
But yeah, so I mean, part 2 ends with, oh, she's going to be okay, folks, and now she's going to go on another journey away from New Zealand entirely. Correct? And then she just goes to like somewhere on the Mediterranean.
Spain.
There you go. And then she gets to hang out with a bunch of folk. And she's a little off, and they're kind of like, oh yeah, you know, she's a little quiet and kind of weird, but you know, there's her boyfriend that emerges, her fuck buddy. He's just like this the American from Ohio. So
oh god,
this shitty poem before they have sex.
Yeah, and they fuck, and it's like it's like Henry and June. I feel like I'm watching Henry and June all over again. Hooray! It's a movie, RJ.
So have we watched it yet?
No.
Oh, okay.
Henry and June is also the name of the characters in that movie, the TV show Kablam. Were you big Kablam boys?
No. But guess
Never
what? Hey, guess what year Henry and June came out? 1990.
Yeah.
It's about Henry Miller and his wife June.
Is your wife's name Miller too?
Yeah. And it's about them, but also enjoying a bohemian lifestyle. It's 1931, so you know, probably 20 years earlier. You know, he's writing about that very sexy Tropic of Cancer. You know, you like Fred Ward? You like Tremors?
I do like Fred Ward.
Wow.
Quite a bit.
What about Richard E. Grant as Loki? How about Kevin Spacey
as
Richard Osborn or Norman Osborn, perhaps?
Like the Green Goblin?
Green Goblin is in this.
Is he gonna get you kids?
Yeah. Oh,
literally.
Bridget Leahy of Jean Roland, like lesbian vampire fame, is in the movie as well. She plays a prostitute. Yeah. It all comes full circle. So this last hour, like, it's like well made, but I don't know. It's just kind of like it feels like after you've come through the medical horror stuff for an hour, you're like, I don't know if I need like another 50 minutes. Of the story extended indefinitely, because there's no stakes. It's just kind of like, oh yeah, she's still kind of awkward and finding her place, and like other people are kind of like reacting to her sort of, but everything's going to work out fine because there's a whole wide world out there. It's like almost like sucks to New Zealand. I don't know. It's like, hey, if you go somewhere else, things can be fine.
It mirrors Jane Campion's experience when we went to that movie premiere. She talked about, and most New Zealanders have to have the experience of going overseas. Jane did it as well. It's just like, yeah, to become a famous, you go over, you get your experience, you do something over there, and then you bring it back with you. That's a very common New Zealand thing. As we try to hit you with high interest student loans to bring you back. Please come back, bring your knowledge, and come back and pay your student loans.
I think there is like an element too of like us Canadians in New Zealand, the colonies.
Go back to England, yeah. Go back to the old country.
We'll go somewhere else, like, because you're kind of on this outpost that like has like you're now like, well, now you have to go out into the rest of the world and see what else is out there, and it's encouraged, kind of like you don't gain your you don't become seen as like making it if you are just trying to make a living in your home place. You have to go to America, and you have to make your name elsewhere before you're even recognized.
Yeah. To this day, OEs. Do you have OEs, overseas experience? Like going to England and having your OE is like this big. I never did it, but is this big thing that all New Zealanders have to do. They have to do their OEs and go to England for a year. Usually, it's sometimes usually before uni, you'd go do your OE, then you come back and do your uni. It's this huge thing.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, I feel like Angel at My Table is a
great representation of New Zealand and New Zealand cinema.
Bougie. So? It's very bougie.
So I also didn't like the third part, and I thought it dragged on. You could probably just say, and then she went to Spain, became a writer, and all was well afterwards. But Rupa, on the other hand, as an Indian woman watching the movie, she liked the third part because she was so on Jane's side. From, I guess it's how much you're on Jane's side at the first part of the movie. She's like, no, I want Jane over, and this is her direct quote: "I was rooting for Jane to get that dick." So she was really on side. She was really on her side of that scene, and found it really important. Where it seems like the rest of us were just, oh my god, this is just going on and on.
It's like a movie called Dick and Jane.
Wow, big time. Hey, one thing we never covered. Do you think she had dentures?
Yeah, she did. She got her teeth removed, and then had dentures after that.
Was it mentioned that it was dentures though, or did she just have teeth?
I think there was the scene before she got electric shock therapy. There was like a big scene of people's dentures in jars. Like there was a shot of those. It wasn't mentioned what she certainly wouldn't have got implants. She wouldn't have been able to afford them. It would have been dentures for sure.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I was just curious when you were talking about that dick. I was like, what about dentures?
Oh,
I'm just not in a weird way. I was just like, what happened to her teeth? I just interested. That's all. Just interested. Where were we, Jarrett?
Well, I was done. I kind of saying that. I don't know. This is very Criterion to me.
Yeah.
And I don't know. What did you two think of this movie?
Oliver?
Yeah, I've got more to say, but if you want me to go first, I can. But yeah. Basically, where I thought this movie failed was, so in the book, which I read, the main central theme of this movie was, for good or bad, Jane, for her whole life, was told what to do. What wasn't pushed is like she was becoming a teacher at one point. She sort of mentioned one point in the film, I want to become a poet, and then suddenly she was training to be a teacher. That was a big thing. She always wanted to be a poet, but everyone told her, especially being a woman at the time, become a teacher. That's basically your only career option. And there were other points when she was with that Frank Sargentson, which is apparently a very famous New Zealand author. He pushed her to go to England. There was scenes where, he got her on the sickness benefit. It seems insane. She didn't get given it after 8 years in a mental institute. Mm-hmm. But then he was also the one who pushed her to get the literary grant to go to England. She comes to England. She arrives with that other douchebag Irish guy, and he's trying to force her to do something else. She goes to Spain. In Spain, all the Spanish love her because she's not doing what the Americans are doing. Suddenly she does it, and then she gets sort of ostracized by those Spanish maids. So it was what the book and what I thought didn't come across in the movie was that theme of, and not towards the end. It was everyone was telling her this. Actually, you know what, Jane, you're crazy. You have to go to a mental institute. You have to be a teacher. you have to go to England. So some of those experiences were positive, but for her whole life, she was just pushed along, and she accepted it wherever she went. There was another scene in the second part, I think, where she was staying with it was like an auntie or something like that in that shitty little house, and then her sister came and was like, "Oh, I'm going to tell Mum that the situation you're living in is not great." And she was like, "No, don't tell her. She was one of those persons that just didn't want to go against the mold. She never, she ate her food in the kitchen, or she never went into the common room at uni. She never wanted to be a burden on anyone else. And that came up. Yeah, so the movie comes out of as light and poetic, where in the book, every scene that was featured in the book was, this is what happened, and this is why it was incredibly important to me. And I don't think it came across in the movie.
Oliver just fell out off the chair, and
I know, I'm back.
He's back.
He fell out of existence.
Would you like to hear what Jane Campion herself personally told me to say?
Yes,
absolutely.
There's some good old Italian racism in it as well.
Ooh.
So this is exactly what I thought about this movie, because it's got a pretty positive reaction, I think. Mm-hmm. And so she starts it with exactly my thoughts. I have often puzzled over why people loved my film and Angel at My Table so particularly. At the Venice Film Festival, Bloody Bloody Bar, she experienced a reaction unlike mine before or any after. So she was surprised herself that the movie was a big hit. When I watched this movie, it was so middling to me that I don't even know why it's in the collection, to be honest. Well, we've got to the point now where fucking any movie could be in the collection. There's no rhyme or reason anymore.
There's no rules. I mean, I guess it's representative of New Zealand, and
it's not really, because you have no idea where in New Zealand it's set. There's no establishing shots whatsoever. We have no idea what city. There's scenes where she's walking home and she's constantly walking over that hill. It's like, where's the fucking road? Like, where are you? You're in the middle of farmland or what? And I did like the aspect of sort of like, it just looked like New Zealand. Well, it sort of increased the stereotype where we're all just sort of sheep shaggers living on farms. There's a couple. You could always hear. We kept thinking our kids were crying, but it was like the sounds of crying sheep in the background or something like that. But she also wrote, I had no feeling of how my very long film was going down. So she was very aware that the movie was way too long.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to read this bit about it because it cracked me up. Sitting next to me was an elegant, tall Italian woman, tanned to the color of well-cooked bacon.
How well cooked?
Extremely well cooked.
Well tanned,
But she wrote, in her experience, she was unsure of how the movie was going to be received, and this tall Italian, well-cooked, bacon-looking woman was what happened in the movie. She was on, and she explains that she was sort of crying at the point and fighting for Jane at the end to become a successful writer. So supposedly it worked there. Yeah, so I guess it depends on how invested you are in the first two parts of seeing her through that could carry you on to the third. Like, if you're so invested in seeing it sort of shit given to her, the first two parts, will you be willing to watch her fuck around in Europe for ages and become a writer in someone's caravan?
And were you?
Were you? No, I wasn't really.
I think that was maybe one of the best parts of the film. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Yeah, that's interesting. What else did when you were talking with Jane? What else did she say?
Crikey, have you seen the Pie Awards? Steak and cheese one. Actually, interestingly enough, I've lived in all this, so wasn't really sure, but where Jane was with Frank Sargentson was in the North Shore Takapuna, and where she ended up in the rest. So I've lived in all of Jane's, Janet Frame's suburbs that she lived in her life. So she's been a presence in my life. Yeah, we must be somewhere.
She was a presence in your life more than you know, maybe.
Yeah, more than I felt.
I mean, maybe even more. Right, Jarrett?
Yep.
Right, Jarrett? What are we doing here, boys? Where are we going from here?
I've got some more books.
Oh, wow. Look at that.
Book on New Zealand film here.
Is it all Taiki Waititi and Peter Jackson?
Basically, so Jane Campion's section's about a page. The first is Peter Jackson. Russell Crowe gets a huge mention. Mel Gibson gets a mention as well, which is irrelevant.
He's Australian.
Yeah, exactly. They got even the writers themselves got confused. But apparently, so it made $575,000 at the box office, a result that positioned it to be the 5th highest grossing New Zealand film to date. So
that's just
my
sad.
surprise. Yeah, that's $500,000, baby. That's big in New Zealand dollars. You could buy a house. With that.
Oh, half a house.
Half a house, yeah. Wow, that's pretty substantial, I think.
So yeah, apparently it was, somewhat of a success at the time. But I couldn't say anyone from the older generation, like my parents' generation, that would know who Janet Frame was or who would actually even know of this movie. I don't think it has much cultural relevance to New Zealand.
That you know of. Yeah.
Oh, we've got another book just before, so you guys this is
shot in New
books
Zealand.
I've got before. Yeah, so this is about cinematography in New Zealand.
Yeah, so this was a very nicely shot movie because
Yes.
she made
Yeah,
she made a comment that like she was like, I don't know how this is going to play on a theater screen because this was shot for television. It's like all medium and close-up shots, but like I was actually like, oh, this is a very nice looking movie.
Yeah, it was. I like that scene where they're fairies in the woods, even though it's like, as you pointed out earlier, there's a lot of bad shit going on and they're just playing. It's like, it's nice.
It's very precious.
Like the movie Precious?
No.
Oh, have you seen that movie, Jarrett?
No.
Do you want to?
No.
I'm surprised that's not anything. So tell us more about your cinematography book, Oliver Granger.
So just the thing I mentioned before, it was 16 mil. So it said it was shot in 16 mil, but the decision was subsequently made to create a 158 feature film blown up to 35. So yeah, that reinstates my point where I don't think this ever ended up on TV, and probably why there was, mentioned before, no establishing shots. Another reason was when she goes to Seacliff, the Mental Institute, that building no longer exists, but it actually was New Zealand's pretty much most impressive building ever made. So it's unfortunate it wasn't for filming.
So why would you shoot that?
No, it was demolished. Like, I guess because of what you talked about, the sort of history of mental institutes and stuff like that. Honestly, like if you look it up, when you're talking, I'll go find you a picture. But it's just one of the most incredible buildings. But because the history and that kind of stuff, they just go, fuck it, blow it up. Let's move on. We don't want to talk about that. Let's just bury them. But also what was present apparently. So it was about how. Oh, here we go. Not only is the camera clipped close to the character, but many shots are framed at her head height to enhance her point of view. And the first part where Janet is played by 3 different actresses. So there was 3. I think there was probably a second one in college, and then maybe a different one on adult. To her teenage years and early childhood, this gradually was raising the height level. So when they were filming in her point of view, apparently throughout the film, they would be shooting down here, and as she got older, the point of view was raised higher as her age grew.
I totally picked up on that. It was one of the first things I noticed.
Wait, there's 3 different actresses?
Wait a minute, she didn't get lobotomized? Yeah, I totally picked up on that, you guys. Don't even look into it anymore. Just trust me. I mean, that's interesting, though. There's a lot of craft that goes into this stuff. Craft that gets unnoticed on people who are like me, who are just kind of like...
Or 300 movies down who no longer research the movie, that's for sure.
If it ever happened before.
Yeah.
I remember getting books. I remember those days.
Yeah. This is a pretty impressive building you just sent us.
Yeah. So there's pretty much buildings like that don't really exist in New Zealand. I don't know if you had it in Canada. I guess Canada was
out east.
I don't know how old your country is.
Out east, they have stuff like that. Maybe, but right before they get to us, they have some cool looking buildings like this. And then now everything here is strip malls.
So New Zealand as a country is one of the last sort of countries ever found, or basically founded by Europeans. That is, and so you had this period of beautiful 1800s buildings. But since we're so young, we had no knowledge of sort of historical, preserving those buildings. So all of those were destroyed and rebuilt. So there's nothing like that really exists anymore. But you know, something like England, you'll see shit like that all the time because by that point they'd understand that you want to keep these old buildings around. But we never got that here until now. We're like, wait a minute,
shit. Well, the English fetishize that stuff. That's their entire industry for tourism. It's just that past and look how great we
look
were.
At this old building.
Look how great we were. remember when we
before immigration.
Remember when we exploited the whole planet? That was great. And then we lost it all, and then we couldn't even pay our garbage men.
So what are things you learned about New Zealand after watching this movie?
It's like anywhere else.
One thing.
It's like everywhere else. It stinks.
I'll tell you one thing. If you're in New Zealand, you're gonna drown.
Yep.
You're gonna drown.
So
That's the only way you're gonna die.
We had 2 drownings, and in my mind I went, well, I guess they are surrounded by the Pacific, right? But I'm like, I don't think they're drowning in the ocean necessarily.
No, because
one girl drowned
in
the bathhouse,
and the other was like a lake. Was it a lake or something? I don't know.
Yeah.
Lakes are pretty hard to swim in. You guys would know about that, I suppose. But without the salt, you don't really float. So if you swim in lakes, it's quite a lot more work.
Yeah. I mean, we are completely landlocked, so we only know lake swimming. We do not have ocean swimming. So this floating business sounds incredible, but that is not something that we are privy to.
Come on down, I'll take you to the beach, eat a pie, and go show you Hobbiton.
Tell me more about buoyancy.
Buoyant. Yeah, the number one thing I learned from this is that if you live in New Zealand, you're going to drown. And it just seems like a accepted fact at this point. So that's fine. That's no biggie. I mean, it is what it is, right? You come to Canada, something else is going to get you. Right, Jarrett?
What in the world? I don't even know what this is. This
it's a person that was at Seacliff, the mental institute she was in.
Okay. Yeah, that's a nice big building. Looks cool.
RJ, what did you think of this movie?
Haven't I already told you?
Tell me again. I thought I thought you got the lobotomy too.
I did for about 5 minutes there. I was kind of. This probably be the briefest I've ever talked on this podcast, but I feel like you guys have covered a lot of ground here, so I feel like I don't have to. I thought it was a good show. I mean, it's like you guys have both kind of pointed out, like there's some really nice shots in this bad boy. I do think it's a bit of a I wouldn't even say grind.
A slog.
It's a long. Yeah, it's a slog. It's a long movie. So there are dips. Like and I think I dipped at the wrong times, like when I thought that a character got a lobotomy but didn't. And that's fine. That's fine. I'll wear that crown. I'll carry that cross all day.
To go with your other crowns. You have many crowns.
I have many crowns.
I'm gonna reiterate. I was also unaware that there was 2 different actresses in that movie from 200
episodes. I recall. I recall.
Mm-hmm. So it's not just RJ's fault.
That does come up often on YouTube. There seems to be a lot of you people out there. You weirdos, but that's fine.
I think maybe we are the right ones is what the point is.
We were so invested in the movie, we just believed the illusion of cinema that we didn't even notice.
You were swept away by the magic on the screen.
Yeah. It's about filmmaking, Jared. It's about cinema. What the hell was I talking about?
Thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know, man. I thought it was like a decent show. It does slog for me a little bit.
What high praise. It was decent. It was kind of a slog.
I mean, that's kind of where we are with this podcast, right?
Well, no. Last week's like, this movie's awesome. And
that movie was awesome.
You guys I've looked up. I was just curious to see, like, where can I come back again? That's right on Godzilla. The 300 to 400 section comes. There's some fucking weird spine numbers, like the golden age of television and all this. There's some real bizarre spine.
Well, there's I'm really. I think RJ has been really excited to watch Berlin Alexanderplatz. The whatever it is 13, 14 episode series.
Oh, God,
that might take more than an episode, but
I think
at least we got a month of samurai films coming up.
We do, and
and you guys can do that one a week, right?
No, we're gonna do 2 double headers, but it's broken up. No, it's gonna be broken up during Ghoul School, so we'll only do it like every other week. Yeah,
it's all news to me. So I feel like a real Janet Frame right now.
Yeah, you're being told what to do.
Being told what to do. No one's listening. I got big red hair, and people just don't pay attention to me, and I'm just here, just doing this.
One thing I'd like to mention in the movie as well, which I don't know if it's happening in Canada as well, but the stuff, especially stuff after COVID, is people not investing in the arts. That's the first thing that goes, right? And so, for example, when she moved to England, they gave her quite a substantial amount of money to get over there, the New Zealand government, but were rewarded in turn with, for example, this movie that was successful, her books. You invest a little bit in these artists, it might take a little while, and some might turn out, but you get some good return, and you're getting cultural exposure of New Zealand to the wide world, which I fear no longer happens. When do you hear of people getting grants nowadays to just do creative shit? It doesn't. That's the first thing that goes, and when they're cutting budgets, when no tourists are allowed in the country.
Get that Bolshevik shit off my podcast. All right?
I think the two things
cut it to the bone.
I think
we don't need art.
That stood out to me is that Oliver's saying that that art saved someone, which I think is very important. Art is real and it saves people every day. And I think too, exposure is a potential avenue for profit, is what I'm hearing here.
Oh, see, I like profit. Ooh, now you're talking about language. Quark.
Well, that's just what I heard.
All right. Got some of that gold laced latinum over there?
Gold pressed latinum? Yeah. That's all I got, baby. That's all I got.
Yeah.
No, I don't know. I think you guys actually talked about a lot of. I kind of popped in when I had something to say. I think the asylum stuff is pretty dark, and it's like, yeah, that's how that's gonna go. I think poverty porn, as you put it, Jared, is also, it is what it is. And then I didn't mind old lady or like older college girl going off, living her life, finally having a win. I was like, I'm fine with this too. It's all about ups and downs. Ups and downs.
We call that swings and roundabouts.
Yeah, ebbs and flows. Swings and roundabouts.
Do you like the end, being a successful New Zealand writer involves riding out of someone's caravan on their property?
Mm-hmm.
She made it, guys. She's writing a book. She doesn't.
I didn't think there was any other way to do it.
I'm pretty New Zealand book money, baby.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure Mel Gibson writes out of a van when he's writing scripts down in New Zealand.
So the house that she when she first was pushed to go to England, that Frank Sargentson author, where she was living in the shed, is like a historical house in New Zealand. And I was planning on doing some big photo shoot there for you guys. But we drove past it, and it was all, nowadays people get pissed off because all the good roadways are turned into cycleways, so there's nowhere to park anymore. So we drove past it, and I was like, I'm just looking for that house. It was like, it's probably that shit house over there. And I was like, you're probably right. And we drove past it, and that was that.
Let's not get out of the car.
We couldn't find a park to get out, so that was that.
Oh, dear.
Dear.
Well, so you guys want to hear about who hates an angel at my table?
I guess.
All right. Well, here we go. Oh, I see that Gary Collections reappeared.
Uh-oh.
But I don't know. I mean, I don't know about these worked reviews. I want real ones, you know.
Oh, it is what it is. You tell them, Jer.
This is from today. From
weird.
Lake Jones.
I believe is a listener.
Oh, shit. I don't know.
I believe.
I mean,
a follower on on Letterboxd at the very least.
Well, they follow me, so apparently they are listening. I guess I should give them.
One thing. Can you do a fucking meme that just puts everyone's names out there and explains who they are? Because I've lost all. I used to be able to keep track of us all, but I just can't do it anymore.
Too many.
I don't know who these people are.
The Creepsville. Oh well, maybe I'd have to like figure it out and then like if they have a review, I could have it. That's a link. That's the list. It'll click through the people that are listeners. Lake Jones writes, "I will never respect an Australian. Go back to your jail island."
I like it. I like it a lot. Lake Jones is a fan of The Graduate, being John Malkovich, and Minding the Gap before sunset. Checks out with me.
Okay.
No problems here.
Sweet. Good. This is from Bulletproof Cupid, half a star.
Okay.
I don't know how many times I've started and stopped this over the past 2 months, but I just can't seem to get into it at all. Maybe I'll give it another shot at some point, but I give up for the moment.
Just fucking give up, man. Like, honestly, we're doing... I'm going to say we because you've included me, but we're doing this shit for you. If you don't fucking like a movie, just stop. Don't watch it, and never watch it again. There's so many good fucking movies to watch.
Just stop.
Just don't... You don't have to watch it. Especially this movie. No one's telling you to fucking watch Angel at My Table. Just stop.
I agree.
And also, like, tell people about it on Letterboxd
Yeah.
as a note to myself. Yeah, I was feeling about
One
it
day.
today. One day I'll maybe get to it. It's like, I'm just not feeling it. It's like, no one cares.
What's going to change?
It's fine.
Like, with me, when I talked about, for you non-YouTube listeners, about being a parent and rediscovering movies about parenthood that are more effective, there's nothing, unless you become an author, there's nothing that's going to change in your life, unless you move to New Zealand or something, there's nothing that's going to make this movie more relevant.
Yeah. Well, Bulletproof Cupid, their picture is a minion in dominatrix gear, and their bio is, "I like what I like, and make no excuses or apologies for it."
You hear that, Oliver? No excuses.
No excuses or apologies. Their favorite film
YOLO.
is Platoon. So,
they like that Ollie Stone.
yeah.
The other Oliver.
They like what they like. No excuses.
Gary Collection. I love those redheads, man. Wooderson. After such a great movie, even though there were no zombies, John dives back into the crap with Annie Down Under. Yeah, so like this had some like Little Orphan Annie vibes, right?
A little bit.
No, that red hair.
Did you notice the carpet didn't match the drapes?
Oh dear. We trade Daddy Warbucks for a mental asylum, America for Australia, and good songs for crap. I can't keep doing this, Dennis and John. It has to end sometime. It just has to. It feels like there's some coded messages from Gary.
Something's going on here.
Something's happening over there. Child of Saturn, 1 star. Although Janet Frame's life is interesting, I found this film incredibly dull.
Yeah.
I mean, potentially. It's worth noting that Gary Collection's favorite films have changed to The Rock, Armageddon, Fat Girl, and Salo.
I thought those were the same as 2 weeks ago. Or are you confusing it with John Criterion?
No, John Criterion was
Jellyfish, yeah.
Eyes. Jellyfish Eyes.
Yeah.
This person, Child of Saturn, only has 2 one-star films, An Angel at My Table and Problem Child, the John Ritter film. So interesting.
Both featuring redheads.
Yes. Strange.
Emperor Cusco. I do not like this movie. I was waiting for it to end the entire time.
Just fucking turn it off.
Stop. Just stop.
Very to the point.
Wait.
Here's another one.
Whoa. This is okay. This is Child of Saturn. And then, like, 3 years earlier, there's Burn That Dress, 1 star. Although Janet Frame's life is interesting, I found this film incredibly dull.
Whoa.
What? Burn That Dress is a film?
Burn That Dress
it's
is another
another
user
follower.
who has a word-for-word review as another person, as Child of Saturn. Like, it's exactly
I
the
just
same.
hate Angel at My Table, man. There's a lot of us out there.
Maybe Burn That Dress was their first account, and then they lost access to it.
Burn That Dress,
I think-
that sounds like some sort
I
of
think that's
portrait of a lady on fire kind of shit, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's what happened here, Jared. Very questionable.
Very questionable. Some people talk about how boring it is. Yep. Okay, here we go. Here's a long one. One more for the boys here. Dave Evans. There are some movies that you just react strongly to. For me, An Angel at My Table was one of the most memorable films I watched in 2014, but for all the wrong reasons. Even now, almost 2 years after seeing it, when I think of bad movies that I've seen, this comes right to my mind. It's not that An Angel at My Table is poor filmmaking. It is fairly competently made, and the general consensus seems to be that it's a good film. However, for me, it was a chore to sit through. I found it slow, boring, and somewhat unpleasant in places. Considering that I tend to like biopics and appreciate films about important literary figures, I even enjoyed Sylvia, I really should have been able to find something to like in this. As it was, I only came away with a better knowledge of Janet Frame's life. I could not muster up the desire to care for these characters on the screen and what happened to them. I can see why others like this film, but it was certainly not for me. Thanks. Thanks, Dave.
Do you find that people have to like justify
Yes.
like so hard of why they don't like? Just say you don't like. You don't have to say that. Oh, I didn't like this movie, but by the way, I liked other similar movies. Just say you don't like it, man. You don't have to justify it. Who are you talking to? Just the Criterion creeps. We don't.
Mhm.
We're
It's
saying we.
It's the people who like have to always write these like professional critics even who are like, well, French Dispatch isn't going to make any new fans from people who don't like Wes Anderson. They always have to write that because they're I don't know, they have nothing to say. They're not real human beings with real thoughts. They're just like, I get paid to do this and I got to make sure I cover all my bases, make sure all voices are heard. I make sure plurality is established. Otherwise, I have failed as a writer to communicate. It's like, no one cares.
No one cares. You
No
didn't
one-
like this movie? Sure, mate.
Dave Evans. Lover of period dramas, partial to British films and miniseries, and with a weakness towards slightly silly comedies and musicals. Please feel free to follow me, especially if you have similar film interests. Favorite films include The Sound of Music, To Kill a Mockingbird, Pride, and Sunshine on Leith.
I think this guy's the Browning version fan, to be honest.
He gave Spice World 3.5 stars. Wow, is that his most recent review? That was in 2020.
COVID got him, man.
Shit. Oh no. The last film he watched was on Halloween of 2020. What She Said, The Art of Pauline Kael. I don't think Pauline would have given this film a very good review. While occasionally entertaining, it doesn't feel well put together. A lot of the talking heads don't add anything at all to the documentary. The use of very short film clips to illustrate her life is fun, but surely longer clips from movies actually discussed would have made for a better documentary. Even Pauline's life is not very closely examined. As a film fan, there's plenty here that appeal to me, but as a documentary, this just isn't compelling. And then COVID got him.
Yeah, that's me with all
Yeah.
docos though. Good subject, shit doco.
Excellent.
Like literally every doco.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm totally on board with that sentiment.
I don't know what we're talking about. I don't know Pauline Shaw. I don't even know who that is.
Yeah, for sure. That's something that happened. I get it completely.
Pauline.
Yeah, who is Pauline Kael?
You'll have to watch that Charlie Kaufman movie to
Which one?
find out. The one with not Philip Seymour Hoffman.
I did watch that one.
I know. And didn't you find out all about Pauline Kael?
I don't know. I don't remember names, dude.
Fuck it.
I don't even know your name.
I know. Like, it's that lobotomy you got. Remember in the middle of the episode?
Yeah, I know. It was only for like 5 minutes. Just
Any final thoughts on An Angel at My Table?
no.
At the lobotomy table?
We should.
Hey,
we all,
so
yeah.
where was this angel?
It's a good question.
Oliver?
Who is
Did
her
you guys-
savior?
Did you guys ever get beaten by your parents?
No.
Did you guys know? I mean, it's a New Zealand thing. Even I did.
Okay. So
Is that a euphemism or like
It's-
full on like?
No, they actually had to legally ban it here because it was undefined of what you could and couldn't do to a child. And so they just had to say,
Nice.
look, this is getting a bit confused. We're just going to have to ban the whole thing. But yeah, it was very common. Most New Zealanders would have. I got hit by the hairbrush all the time.
Yeah. I mean, it
but-
happens.
But Daddy did support my writing career by buying me a journal, so it's all good.
Wow,
So-
he was supporting the arts.
Is that what the title is in reference to?
I don't really remember her being at a table. No, actually, I have no idea what that.
Well, she was at a table in part 1, which is not the name of part 1. It's Island, and yeah,
Part 2 is an angel at a table.
Yeah.
But that's where
And
she's.
The third one's
in the
Mirror
asylum.
City, but I think Mirror City. I can't remember. That's made clear. I don't know.
remember those nice Shakespeare quotes from our boy Prospero. Remember those?
I think that's when we should have had a Janet Frame quote. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's Shakespeare. It's like, come on, talk normally, man.
Yeah, get the fuck out of here with
Mm-hmm.
that shit. Well, there you go. Oliver talking about getting beat up as a kid. Cool. Jesus. Anyway, after the break, we finally get that dick.
Ugh.